I'm here on a job site with Tim, who owns his own electrical contracting business.
3 employees and 2 work trucks.
Tim traded up to Geico Commercial Auto Insurance. We're positively here where he needs us most.
They sure are.
With step-by-step help on all his insurance needs, all for shockingly low rates.
Shockingly low, huh?
Just a little bit of electrician humour. Do you get it?
I got it.
You know, it feels like we have a real connection. All right, I'll stop.
Get a commercial auto insurance quote today at geico.com and see how much you could save. It feels good to Geico.
The day I was introduced to the idea of making beer at home, I ran to the local homebrew shop and I bought the recommended starter kit, which included a plastic bucket, a glass carboy, a hydrometer, as well as some knickknacks to facilitate packaging and carbonating in bottles. Well, about 7 years later, once I'd wrapped up grad school and got a job that would allow me to spend more money on this hobby, I switched to all grain, and like many people at the time, I converted a 70-quart ice chest into a mash lauter tun. By my recollection, it was around the early to mid-2010s that I started to notice companies focusing specifically on providing homebrewers with gear that was arguably higher tech, from cigar box stir plates for yeast starters and temperature controllers that allowed the user to set specific schedules based on whatever it was they were fermenting, to floating digital hydrometers and, of course, fancy electric brewing systems. Well, I strongly believe that excellent world-class beer can absolutely be made using more rudimentary gear. I also have a fascination with tech, as well as a sort of an obsession with efficiency, which I know can mean different things to different people. The truth is, I've had the opportunity to try a lot of new gear over the years, and while some of the techie stuff has absolutely improved my overall brewing experience, others I felt sort of did the opposite. It just didn't add to the expected benefit while contributing to less fun aspects of brewing, like having an additional thing to clean. But I know, that some people have loved the stuff that I've hated and vice versa. They've hated the stuff that I seem to like. This is the Brülosophy Podcast. I'm your host, Marshall Schott, and the focus of this Brews Views episode is homebrewing tech. Now, rather than sharing my very subjective opinions, to get a more broad perspective on things, I tapped our patrons for their opinions, asking them to share, their views on homebrewing tech in general. Of course, I'll be offering some commentary as well. I'm really looking forward to this one. I think it's going to be fun. Now, this is a Brews Views episode where we don't bind ourselves to the highly professional approach that we typically take when producing this podcast, which is really just to say that I'm going to use some language that some people might choose to find offensive. If that's you, just consider yourself warned. We don't want anybody feeling bad after this. All right, if you're a fan of this show and you'd like to receive a reward for helping us to keep it going, please consider becoming a patron of Brülosophy over at patreon.com/Brülosophy, where you make a small pledge and you receive rewards like access to unpublished contributor recipes, unique perks from YakimaValleyHops.com, and an invitation to monthly live brew days with a Brülosophy contributor, as well as inclusion in episodes just like this one and our Brew & A episodes. You can learn more about all of the rewards we offer for your support over at patreon.com/Brülosophy. Another really easy way to support us is by using the links found at brülosophy.com/support when you're shopping online. Your experience doesn't change at all, and we get a little kickback for that referral. And finally, if you wouldn't mind leaving a rating and review of this show in Apple Podcast or wherever it is you listen to podcasts, that'd be awesome as well. Feedback is brought to you by Clawhammer Supply, who, in addition to having a remarkable YouTube channel chock full of great brewing-related content, they sell what we believe to be are some of the best electric brewing systems on the market. If you've been considering making the move from propane to electric, you really do owe it to yourself to check out what Clawhammer Supply has to offer. Whether you're after a 120-volt 5-gallon unit or something bigger like their powerful 240-volt 10-gallon system, Clawhammer has got you covered. Learn more about everything they have over at clawhammersupply.com, and don't forget to check out their YouTube channel as well. Listener and patron Craig Graham shot us a question that I felt was apropos, considering the warning that we give at the beginning of all of these Brews Views episodes. Craig said, on some episodes, you warn about language and use the phrase, if you choose to be offended. Do you think there's anything universally offensive, or that anytime we're offended, it's because we choose to be? This is the kind of shit I love talking about and could spend way too long on, Craig, so I'm going to do my best to keep my response as succinct and clear as possible. For starters, I do not believe anybody is born with like a gene that makes specific things, quote, offensive. Rather, we learn what qualifies as offensive based on things like culture, what our family teaches us, the friends that we're around, the company that we keep, basically nurture over nature. Now, with that said, while I might not feel like I'm consciously choosing to be offended by something, I am confident we all have the ability to at least question those feelings when they're there. And from that point, we then choose what to do with them. Do I allow them to make me resentful or angry, or do I, analyze those feelings and make a choice to let them affect me in a more, effective or even productive way? I'm not saying that nothing offends me. I'm appalled at so much of what's going on in the world right now, where we've got people pretending they're one thing while their behaviors don't back that up at all. Racism seems to be on the rise. Bigotry is being actively encouraged by leaders, many of whom are clearly projecting. I mean, we've all heard what happens to the Grindr app when certain events roll through town. That shit is fucking offensive. And I fully acknowledge, that I am choosing to not ignore that craziness. I'm choosing to let it affect me in a way that leaves me feeling bothered. I'm choosing to be offended, as it were, in part because I believe me feeling that way is valid. It motivates me to do something about it. Now, for something that I would contend is, quite trivial, like certain words people use for emphasis, I typically have no issues. The one exception is derogatory words used specifically to harm or hurt other human beings. That's offensive, though I struggle not to feel at least sort of bad for the ignorant dumbasses who are brainwashed, to possess such a fucking ignorant worldview. Now, that may offend you hearing me say that. It's not bad enough, to let them slide, of course, but, that level of stupidity could be viewed as a sort of disability in many ways. Anyway, Carlin's 7 words that you can't say on TV do not bother me, but I know they do bother some people. So out of respect for them, I try to include that warning at the front of those shows. Yeah, you know what? I think that's where I'll just pinch this one off for now. Thank you so much for the question and for your patronage, Craig. You are so appreciated. If you have show feedback, you could send it to feedback@brülosophy.com or leave us a note on social media. Be sure to pick your Brülosophy merch up over at brülosophy.com/shop. We're offering more options than we ever have before, from t-shirts, hoodies, and hats to fanny packs, shorts, coffee mugs, and so much more. We have done our best to keep prices very reasonable, and international shipping is now available. Again, you can go to brülosophy.com/shop, click one of the product images on that page, or you can go directly to our Dashery store at brülosophy.dashery.com. We've also put a link in the description of this episode.
What would you do if your online store converted 36% more shoppers? You could take 36% more vacation.
Another pina colada?
Yes, please.
Open a new retail location with 36% more square feet.
Fantastic.
Hire 36% more help.
You're hired and you're hired.
Shopify has the world's best converting checkout, up to 36% better than other e-commerce platforms. What you do with those extra sales is up to you. Switch to Shopify today at shopify.com/listen and get a $1 trial. Shopify.com/listen.
Stop guessing and start perfecting your craft with Brewfather, the ultimate tool for recipe design. Brewfather Premium unlocks advanced inventory tracking, tilt integration for real-time fermentation monitoring, and seamless cloud sync across all of your devices. But wait, there's more. Premium Plus just changed the game with Brewfather's brand new AI recipe integration. Whether you're looking to clone a rare commercial classic or need a creative spark for a unique grain bill, Brewfather AI helps you build balanced, world-class recipes in seconds. Brewing is a science. Make it art with Brewfather Premium Plus by visiting brewfather.app today. That's brewfather.app. Better beer is just a click away. So when I made the post to our Patreon page seeking opinions on homebrewing tech, I asked that our patrons try to keep their responses somewhat concise so that I could get to as many as possible. And I soon realized that people must have different interpretations of what exactly concise means. Suffice to say, some responses are a bit long, but I thought they were really good, so I'm not going to do too much editing. We also got way more responses than I expected, which is rad, and there seem to be a few themes that I'm sure you're going to pick up on. The first view comes from Jeremiah Pickard, who says, in all caps, Brewfather. From the inventory to the calculators to the recipe library, I love it, and it has definitely made my brewing hobby as a whole more organized and enjoyable. While I do for at least one brew a year break out the old pencil and paper and crunch all the numbers by hand just to pay homage to the brewing gods and those that have gone before, I will always be grateful for this app and the creators behind it. Jeremiah, just a forewarning, you're going to hear Brewfather quite a lot during this episode, and I could not agree more. This is one bit of tech that I absolutely love. I've used so many calculators, and no shade to any of the calculators that are out there that I used before I picked up Brewfather. But man, Thomas, the guy behind Brewfather, really is doing an amazing job. And on top of that, they have been one of the very consistent sponsors of us, which I think is so cool that they've stuck around. I really hope that what we're doing and the promotion we give them, gets more people to go check out Brewfather, because it is one of the most robust, just has so many cool options when it comes to recipe design and everything that you need for designing and even brewing a batch of beer. Just an awesome app. So I agree completely, Jeremiah. Nicholas Hubbard says, not exactly tech, but my CO2 tank, from purging star sand from kegs to keeping them completely oxygen free, transferring beer from the fermenter to kegs to pushing beer into cans with my Blickman beer gun. The CO2 is the oxygen free propellant that makes it all happen. Nicholas, I don't know what I would do. I didn't even think about this when I was asking the question, because my mind went to the more, highly techie stuff. That CO2 tank is still technology in many ways, and I don't know what I would do without it in my brewery for all the reasons that you listed. So amen, brother. I am a huge fan of CO2 and the tank it comes packaged in. All right, Ricky Alexander says, I have a topic that I'm still developing an opinion on. Oh, this is a good one, Ricky. Artificial intelligence, AI. I understand that it's easy for homebrewers to hop on with a chatbot and have them spit out an arguably cool image that corresponds to their beer name to make a nice label, or to hop on with a chatbot to give them ideas for a name for their beer. Then they can spit out a label, or hop on with a chatbot and have them suggest a recipe for the beer they want so they can have them spit out a name and a label, or hop on with a bot and have them suggest a style, recipe, name, and a label for the beer. But is that still fun? The majority of the hobby for me is using my brain to think of how flavors and aromas and textures play together to make beer fun and interesting. Why have a computer do it for me? It also wastes a ton of water, and at a pro brewery scale robs local artists of an economic and or promotional opportunity. A few weeks ago, you discussed a listener feedback question where the listener was interested in reducing their carbon footprint when brewing, and topics were discussed like ways to cut back on water, buying domestic ingredients rather than imports, to minimize fuel loads and supply chain stress. But later that episode, the brew team used AI to create BJCP descriptions for styles that don't currently exist in the BJCP. This exercise wasted more water than a homebrewer's probably used in a year, and they know the guy who writes the descriptions personally, which they mentioned on the episode. I would have much preferred a fun contribution from Gordon Strong. Anyway, I think AI is something I do not currently need in my brewery. Ricky, you are not the only person to call us out for generating those AI descriptions. Here's the way that worked, and I'm not trying to make excuses. I just went to Google and said, how is West Coast Pils, for example, defined, because it's not in the BJCP. The very top search result was the Gemini AI thing. And I thought, okay, I'll just take that. What I'm realizing is that it is becoming, first off, valid opinion. I'm right there with you. It sounds like you might have a stronger opinion about it than I do, at least at this point, which I think is, again, super fair, totally valid. I feel like no matter what we do these days, the AI, generative responses or whatever are unavoidable. And if they are easy, or if they are avoidable, it's not terribly easy to avoid them. I'll put it that way. I also, again, do find some value in aspects of AI. I think, now if it is using as much water as a lot of people seem to believe, when I looked into it, there was a lot of misinformation out there about the actual amount of water it takes to answer a question like, what is West Coast Pils defined as? Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I do think we're going to learn a lot more about the environmental impact these AI chatbots are actually having in the near future. But you look at things like Brewfather, which again is going to come up a ton in this episode. They just integrated AI into their app as well. Do I think that's a bad thing? I don't know. I think there are people out there who will want it. I think there are people out there like you, Ricky, who will absolutely avoid it. I have not used AI in my brewing so much yet, but again, maybe I have and I didn't notice it. But yeah, I'm with you. And you're right. I could have emailed Gordon and see if he wanted to come up with some flowery language to use for all of those styles we talked about in that episode. Didn't even cross my mind. I mean, we plan these things often a day or two ahead of time. So, but yeah, I appreciate your opinion. I'm kind of with you that as of now, I'm not seeing a use for AI in my brewing personally. I have access to it on Brewfather and I've not used it once. But I know people out there who are using AI to fully design recipes for them that, may or may not turn out well. I guess I haven't had one yet, but appreciate the opinion, Ricky. All right. John Hiller says, I started homebrewing in 2007 and brewed for several years. Then I had to take a 10-year hiatus. I got back into brewing last February and all the new tech blows my mind. I love it. I feel like Captain America being unfrozen. See, I think of Austin Powers, but yeah. For starters, these all-in-one systems are so amazing. I probably would have never taken a hiatus to begin with if these existed back then. Then these floating hydrometers that track your fermentation and put the data in a cloud is a game changer. Not to mention things like the Easy Dens. That's an Anton Par digital refractometer. I can't imagine ever going back to my old ways of brewing, and I look forward to even more tech and innovation being created. That's awesome, John. I mean, to be able to re-enter a hobby that you love so much and have access to these things that actually do what, according to what it sounds like for you, make your brew day way more enjoyable, more efficient, and is kind of invites you to want to keep doing it more and more. I love that. The one drawback, and I'll probably bring this up a few times today, is that all of that stuff is a lot more expensive than what I started homebrewing with. And so, hobbies are for blowing money, careers are for making it. I understand that. Just to reiterate, you don't need any of that to make good beer. You might want it to improve your brew day experience. And for that, I think it's badass. So Pat Souza says, electric brewing was an easy transition. It's quiet and predictable. I had a control panel go out mid-boil on an early gen Brewzilla. It was still working. I just had no screen. Williams Brewing replaced it right away, and it's still going strong. I use tilt hydrometers too. Looking at the app takes the guesswork out of what's going on inside my stainless fermenters. All right, first mention of a tilt hydrometer. These are the floating hydrometers that you put into your wort, and it tracks the fermentation throughout. I think they're badass. I have zero interest in using them. Why? Because my fermentations, I do the same thing every time for the styles that I brew. So, if I'm making a cold fermented lager, I know more or less exactly what I want to do with that. I don't need something telling me, what I don't need to track attenuation. That's not something that interests me, but I love that it is an option for those out there who do like that level of geekiness and data collection. It's badass. I've used one time and I just felt, I use it several times, but at one point I was using one of those floating hydrometers. I think it was an early version of one of the popular ones that's out there now. And like I said, it just didn't do much for me. And I felt like, now I have this other thing I have to clean and worry about and put batteries in or charge and do all that. I just thought, not for me, but I'm glad it's there for people like Pat who really do love that. And the Brewzilla, for the price, that is one of the probably most affordable electric all-in-one brewing systems. And man, they work great. So if you have 110 volt, can't bump up to that 240. I think they do make a 240 option as well, but the Brewzilla, very affordable. All right, Espen says, all-in-one electric brew kettle is definitely what has allowed me to brew beers. It was never an option for me to get a propane setup, and brewing on the kitchen cooktop would severely limit my brew capacity, not to mention annoy my wife. I think we can all relate with our partners not wanting us to overtake the kitchen for 4 to 5 hours for a brew day. And if you're doing that several times a week, especially bothersome, I totally understand. I was happy using gas. I actually plumbed natural gas into my garage at the old house, and was quite happy with the way that worked. What I loved so much about electric brewing is, like Espen said, or somebody said earlier, it's so quiet, and for me, it really did make controlling temperatures easier, such that I wasn't getting boil overs as often. I love them. I'll never go back, but I still have a propane setup that if I needed to use, I could. I don't have any issues with that. For me, where I live and the fact that I have solar, brewing electric is also just notably cheaper. I was spending a lot more money on natural gas, which here in California, PG&E's got to make their money. And so, I was happy to move away from paying for gas and rather use the electricity that I generate from my roof for running my brewery. Zachary says electric heating element has been a godsend. Every propane brew I've had boiled over at some point. Not an issue yet with electric. Agreed, Zachary. Whether it's just the heating element that you're, running into a independently of your kettle or you're using an electric system. The electric brewing has made brewing so much more approachable for so many people. Craig Fraser says, first, Beersmith. I know Brewfather works well, but my brain thinks in Beersmith since I've used it since 2010. Also, equipment to oxygen-free transfer to kegs. My homebrew lasts much longer in a quality state. Yes, Beersmith is phenomenal. It is a great app. I find certain aspects of Brewfather just a bit more appealing and have switched everything over to Brewfather. But Beersmith is still a great app for those who speak the language of Beersmith. Absolutely good stuff. I get that. Oxygen-free transfers. I feel like this kind of leans into that first one about CO2 tanks and whatnot. Yeah. Again, Craig, I couldn't agree more, man. When I started to realize that cold side oxidation really was the bane of the brewer's existence in terms of freshness and shelf life and all of that, it changed my game. I mean, the beers that I make now that are ostensibly, never touch oxygen until they're poured out of the faucet. I just feel last longer, taste better. Yeah, good stuff. Jake Jones says, wireless hydrometers, the tilt specifically for me, but the ability to measure gravity without exposure to oxygen has been huge. It's also drastically shortened my fermentation schedules because I can see the trend line on the graph and see when it's time to ramp up the temp. Another one for floating hydrometers. I've already shared my opinion on that. Another point about what I like about not using these is that I'm going to pull samples anyways. I use my mouth to determine whether or not it's ready to move on to cold crashing and packaging a beer is. And so I like sampling the beer, tasting it from the hydrometer jar. So to me, that's not a waste. Two, I'm fermenting in completely sealed vessels that have a little bit of CO2 on them. So again, no oxidation can happen in that setup. I'm pouring out of a valve on the bottom of my fermentation vessel. So no concern for me on that. But I understand where you're coming from. Those tilts really do make, for people who like to track their fermentation, that just makes it a lot easier, more accessible on that extent. Brian Stevens says, I absolutely love my Play-Doh scales, even though the company has since abandoned homebrewers and discontinued official support for them. Having a live tap list and knowing how much beer I have is a game changer for competitive homebrewing. No more picking up the keg to weigh it and stirring up all the sediment. I always have an estimate of about how many bottles I have left if I need to pack something up in a hurry. Putting one on your CO2 gets you an accurate measurement of how much gas is left in the tank too. Plus, it's just neat to look at. Like so many other abandoned homebrew products, Pico Brew Coffee says, a small community gathered together to figure out how to repurpose the scales after support ended. And honestly, it's now a better product than it was before. Totally worth it if you're a little techie and can find some for sale on the secondhand market. Brian, I'll never forget when Play-Doh abandoned homebrewers, as you said. It did cause a minor uproar, and people were just so upset with the company for leaving, homebrewers in the dust, who had spent a lot of money on this highly technical gear that, like, you're saying, Brian, was very helpful for so many people. I have never owned anything that Play-Doh made, so I can't speak specifically to that. But I do know of people who, like jury rigged their own scale setups so that they could, keep track of how much beer is in the keg at a time. And I think that's awesome. The fact that you're able to see it on a screen and have it just feel kind of professional, I think that's pretty rad. All right, Johnny Taylor says, my Inkbird was probably my first piece of brewing tech and the one I couldn't do without. I bought it for fermentation temperature control, but I now also use them when bottle conditioning, germinating seeds for the garden, and just anytime you want a Wi-Fi thermometer. I was recently lucky enough to join a brew day at a semi-pro brewery, and they had Inkbirds for the hot liquor tank, checking the temperature if different regions of the mash, or in different regions of the mash, and as a backup for the glycol chiller. Every home brewer should have one. one, although they probably already have 3. I actually gave all of my Inkbirds away because I use glycol, and I don't. It's got a built-in STS 1000, all Celsius, but doesn't bother me, controller, and then I've got a I forget what the brand name is, but it was the popular kind of more expensive controller that I've had for years and years, that I use for my a chest freezer that I use for various things during the brew day, as well as just storing beer in. But the Inkbird, I mean, talk about affordable. And I've heard, I haven't looked into this, but I've heard that Inkbird is making like really advanced, Bluetooth accessible temperature controllers now. They've tapped the homebrewing market, so they've got stuff that they're making specifically for homebrewing. Badass. I love that. Again, they're making an affordable version of something that in the beginning at least was costing homebrewers over $100. I think the first Inkbird I bought was like $22. Very rudimentary, very basic. Definitely not Wi-Fi or Bluetooth or anything like that. But if you need temperature control, check out Inkbird. All right, final one for this segment, Jeremy Stoner. There's so much great tech out there. One of my favorite items is the electric grain mill by Grainfather, a hassle-free, easily adjustable mill for all grain types and sizes. It's my only Grainfather piece of kit, and I love it. I have never used one of these, Jeremy, but I've seen them. I've seen videos of them and photos of people using them. They look badass. I think SS Brewtech has one as well that's like a flip switch, and it's kind of like what you would find at a homebrew store. I've still got the Monster Mill MM3. I've had it for over a decade now, and that thing is an absolute beast 3-roller mill that, with the exception of sometimes if I put all of my grain in before I start the mill, it'll kind of get stuck and I just have to hit, punch it with my fist a little bit to get the grain down into the rollers. Just a grain mill in general, I think, is a badass addition to any home brewery, because you get control over the fineness with which you're milling your grain, which we've shown does absolutely have an impact on overall conversion and stuff like that. So amen, Jeremy. I think that's an awesome piece of tech for the brewery. And we're going to be right back with more views on homebrew tech.
You didn't start a business just to keep the lights on. You're here to sell more today than yesterday. You're here to win. Lucky for you, Shopify built the best converting checkout on the planet. Like the just one tapping, ridiculously fast acting, sky-high sales stacking, champion of checkouts. That's the good stuff right there. So if your business is in it to win it, win with Shopify. Start your free trial today at shopify.com/win.
There's no denying that stainless steel is the best material for brewing equipment, and Delta Brewing Systems offers some of the lowest prices on high-quality stainless gear, like the Firm Tank, which in addition to holding 8 gallons or 30 liters of wort, comes with a domed lid to even further reduce the chances of a messy blow-off. Plus, it can hold up to 4 psi of pressure for closed transfers. Delta Brewing Systems also has their own line of brew kettles, as well as one of the lowest-priced all-in-one electric brewing systems out there, and their prices are shockingly low. If you're in the market for legit stainless gear that won't break the bank, do yourself a favor and head over to deltabrewingsystems.com today. Alrighty, the next patron opinion on homebrew tech comes from Jason May, who says, other than Brewfather, which is the obvious one, amen, Jason, a wrapped pill wireless hydrometer paired with my Inkbird temp controller has been a game changer. My brew house is located an hour away from me in my grandma's basement, where she has graciously allowed me to set up shop. My tiny little apartment can't handle a brewing setup, so I have to make the 2-hour round trip to do anything with my beer, which is highly inefficient. With the wrapped pill and Inkbird, I can track temperature and gravity from the comfort of my own home and optimize my driving time and make a fewer trips to randomly hope fermentation is done. I'm very busy, and being able to plan my trips out since I brew with a friend as well has been critical. My grandma did start complaining once I started coming around less due to the wrapped pill. Aw, safe to say she's not a fan of the tech. I've since adjusted back and still make the drive just as much, but now just optimized better. Sorry, Grandma. I feel bad for Grandma, Jason. She needs her grandson in her life. Make sure you keep her company. But yeah, how badass is that? I don't know many people who are doing what you do by brewing in a location that is an hour away from where they live. But man, what a convenient, or how much convenience has this tech added to your brewing. I mean, that must be so nice to be able to know where your, fermentation is at, what temperature. If you're able to change the temperature from, 60 miles away, that is badass. You can do your cold crashing and all of that. But again, just, make sure you're not doing that at the expense of spending time with grandma. Jonathan Hughes says, floating dip tubes save my back, and Brewfather makes recipe creation easy and fun. So 2 trends we're noticing here. One, obvious, Brewfather, people love it. I love it. I'm a big advocate for it. Go check it out if you haven't. And floating dip tubes, whether it's the wrapped pill or the tilt, people really seem to find this way of monitoring fermentation as being insanely convenient. I may not. We have a difference in opinion on that, but I love that it's out there for the people who do like it. That's rad. And especially if it's saving your back. I mean, even better. Mark Rose says, for me, all-in-one brewing is a game changer, and I love my Grainfather G40. The tilt floating hydrometer is invaluable for telling me how the fermentation is actually progressing. No more pitching yeast and assuming anything. I learn from it almost every brew session, and the Easy Dens takes away all of the testing waste, no broken glass, and it gives me certain gravity readings in seconds. If I get a fourth choice, I'm another avid Brewfather fan, which is so much more flexible, usable, and powerful than anything before it. So the Grainfather G40, I've brewed on one once with a friend. It is an awesome, if very professionally minded, all-in-one brewing system. I think it's so rad. I've also brewed on the original Grainfathers. I don't even know what they're called anymore, as well as a 240 volt one when I was out in New Zealand for one of their conferences back before COVID. And yeah, they do exactly what they're designed to do. They're awesome. They work very well. I love that Grainfather also makes all of these other pieces of gear, usually high tech, like the automatic or the auto malt mill. So cool. They're doing great things. And they're still around, which is badass. So, go check them out if you haven't. The Easy Dens comes up again. I think this is the second time. I've not used one, but Martin uses one for his brewing. Again, these things aren't cheap. I think the base model Easy Dens by Anton Par is like $250 to $300, and I saw that they just released a newer, more techie model that pushes like $500. That doesn't interest me. I'm going to be honest. Would I use one if I had it? Probably, but I'm not going to drop that kind of cash on. I'd rather buy, put that money towards a new guitar or something. But I know a lot of people, it seems, are really appreciating what the Easy Dens does for them. Another one for the tilt hydrometer as well. Again, people like not having to, steal a little bit of beer to test to see where it's at fermentation wise. And if you don't like sampling it, then by all means. Christian Forstel says, I have zero modern gear aside from an Inkbird and chest freezer cobbled together. I cobbled together my own fermenters and I bottle. My only requirements for fermenters are that they're airtight, can support a Mylar balloon, and have a rotatable racking arm so I can bottle directly. My hazies are banging and fresh for months. That said, and it ain't modern, but I can't live without dry ice. A CO2 tank costs me $50 where I live, but supermarkets give baggies of crushed dry ice for free. So, Christian, I have to wonder, are you using the dry ice for purging your kegs and such? If so, this is something that I believe it was ex-contributor Ray Found kind of proposed, over a decade ago as a very cheap and easy way to purge oxygen from kegs. You drop in some dry ice, it sublimates, you purge the keg, you let it sublimate more, you purge it again, and ostensibly push all of the oxygen out in a very cheap and easy way. We also we have to pay for dry ice around here, but it is so cheap. You can go to like 31 Flavors or probably any ice cream shop and just ask them how much. The last time I bought dry ice, it was $1 per pound. So I got 7 pounds for $7. In that case, I used it for camping, but yeah, really cool idea there. And I'm not against, like I said at the top of the show, I think world-class beer, I know world-class beer can be made using non-high-tech gear like, cooler MLTs and stuff like that. So more power to you, Christian. I feel where you're coming from on that. All right, Mangrove Mike says Bruzilla and the Wrapped ecosystem from Kegland. He says I am Aussie biased. The Bruzilla makes brewing so much easier for me. I love it, which leads to the Wrapped gear. I now have a fermentation chamber and Wrapped pills. Some people have had issues, but mine have worked perfectly. I can track and alter my brew set automatically according to temp profiles. Even if I'm away from home, based on what is happening, I can jump steps, hold the temperature, and control the fermentation process. It all feeds into the excellent Brewfather, so it's an ecosystem of products that works so well for me. That's the first time this has come up. The fact that Brewfather also has a connectivity with certain types of other tech that's out there, like the Wrapped pill and whatnot, which I think is awesome. So you're sending data from your fermenting beer to the Wrapped ecosystem, and then that can actually be picked up and integrated automatically into Brewfather. Super cool stuff. Again, it doesn't really tickle me to do that, but I love that it's there for people who enjoy that level of geekiness yet again. All right, Tom says, I have gone in on the whole automation side. As you know by your census, a lot of IT nerds here. So true. So I have the whole Wrapped ecosystem with the Bruzilla. Man, so many Wrapped people all responded at the same time on this. Temp controller and pills plugged into Brewfather through its integration. I actually go one step further too and feed this into my home automation platform, which is called Home Assistant. I don't know what that is. It gives me better monitoring and control abilities. All this means I can brew a top shelf batch like clockwork in under 5 hours with zero stress, as all of the alerts and such make it impossible to miss a step. I started with all of this, and wow, I can't imagine the difficulties of pen and paper and stopwatching all of this. Stopwatching it, like actually measuring the time. I know. I still do that. I mean, I thought I was so far ahead of the curve when we got our first like Alexa pod or whatever many years ago, and I didn't have to set an actual physical stopwatch. I would just have, Alexa do it for me, and the alarm would go off and it'd notify me on my phone, and we were all set and good to go. I mean, now, like Tom's saying, you can fully automate a brew day such that you're not touching any timers. It's pretty wild what, we've developed for homebrewing, and the fact that this stuff is still there and people are still utilizing it despite this kind of downturn that we've all been talking so much about. Really cool stuff. All right, Owen Dawson says, I find myself totally ambivalent about homebrew tech. On the one hand, I love geeking out on things like wireless hydrometers, but on the other hand, I remind myself that things like wireless hydrometers are likely beyond the comprehension of most brewers across history. The net result, meticulous planning combined with instinct and impulse on brew day. I love it. Yeah, Owen, I feel like I fall somewhere in the middle. I really appreciate tech. I like trying things out, but when it comes to keeping my brew day efficient and easy, sometimes the additional tech and gear actually does the opposite for me. And I think it might be more mental than physical, meaning that I feel like I'm overthinking things when I'm using stuff that should make me not have to think as much. And so it's just easier for me to engage in the same routine that I've done hundreds and hundreds of times than it is to, learn how to use maybe it's my age too, learn how to use a new piece of gear. Maybe one day something's going to come out where I'm like, you know what, this is what did it. It changed my mind. I mean, I suppose you could say Brewfather did that with how cool their recipe design software is and how many options they offer. But for now, I'm cool doing kind of the old school. Now, mind you, I'm using stainless steel fermentation vessels that are pressure rated up to 5 PSI or something like that. So I can ferment under pressure, small amounts of pressure, do closed transfers and all of that. That's kind of high tech. I just don't like to, or don't have an interest, I suppose, in tracking all of that online because I've just made so many batches that I feel like I don't really need to. And again, I'll say it again. I really like pulling samples to test the, final gravity and whatnot so that I can taste the beer as well. Eric Webster says, aloha, Eric. He says, I'll nominate my electric rig plus glycol chiller, not because it makes things simpler, but because it allows me to be more traditional. I can do step mashes and ferment cool, even though I use modern malts and 3470 most of the time, and that doesn't need it. But the equipment makes it easy to do so. It makes me feel more in touch with brewing history, though I'm sure there is no perceptible difference in the beer. Well, don't be too sure about that, Eric. I'm not even convinced, and I am full bore, ferment with 3470 at ale temperatures. This is the first time glycol chillers came up, though. And I have to admit, I bought a glycol chiller. It was on sale at More Beer like 6 years ago. I think I got it. I think they're normally like $600, and it was on sale for like $500 or $450. So I saved up some cash. I bought the glycol chiller, and I'm with you. It is such an awesome piece of gear in my brewery. Yes, the one that I have limits you. I think it's called the Ice Master 2 Max or something like that. It does limit you to 2 batches, but these days I'm not fermenting 4 batches at a time anyways. They do have chillers that will allow you to do that. But yeah, it's so awesome. It's so efficient. It does add a little bit more cleanup, because you've got coils that are attached to the top. At least for me, they're attached to the top underside of the lid of my fermentation vessel. And those coils do get pretty gross. I mean, all the gunk that falls to the bottom of the fermenter, much of it will kind of stick to the stainless coils. And I have to, be a little bit more observant when I'm cleaning those. And that's not terribly fun, kind of goes against my ethos. But I do love glycol. It's way smaller. It's cheap as hell to run. Big fucking fan of glycol, Eric. I'm right there with you. Vincent Fabiani says, I was going to talk about the Easy Dens by Anton Parr. I think that's the third time it's come up now, but the price shot up from $350 to $600. When I got it, it was on sale, so it was under $350. Yes, it's an awesome little piece of tech, but I cannot justify it for that much. For $599, you could buy a number of things that will expand your home brewery. I think my Keyser build was like $600, which did so much more for my brewery and than a luxury hydrometer. So with all of that said, the Wi-Fi enabled Inkbird temp controllers are awesome. Monitoring and making changes remotely is a huge advantage. Yeah, man. Anton Parr is well known in the commercial brewing world as well for making really accurate, high-end gear. I'm not spending $350 on a digital hydrometer. I have zero interest in that. Especially given what I've said before about wanting to sample the beer anyways. I'm going to be pulling samples regardless of whether I'm, measuring the specific gravity or not. So I might as well just take a hydrometer reading. But again, as you can tell, there are several people who really do enjoy the Easy Dens. Now, Vincent, I do think, I could be wrong about this, but I do think there is still a version of the Easy Dens out there that is around that $350 mark. I think the $600 one is like the newest upgraded version. I don't know. I could be wrong, but I don't want to sound like we're just shitting on, Anton Parr and Easy Dens, or I am. They're an awesome company who produce very, very nice, who produce very nice gear out there. So Easy Dens being one of them. Benjamin Campbell says 3 things stand out for me. Brewfather for its everything, my electric kettle for temperature control, and kegs because I hate bottling. Brewfather, amen. Electric kettles, absolutely. I'm not so concerned about temperature control. In fact, when I brew using any of my electric brewing systems that I've got, I get it up to mash temp, I mash in, and then I just turn the controller off and I let the temperature drop a few degrees over the mash step. It doesn't bother me. I haven't noticed any negative impact from doing that. And my big concern really more is if that, when that element turns on, it's heating up that small portion of mash at the bottom of the kettle. And is that getting hotter than the stuff at the top? Even if you're recirculating and stirring, it will. And I just don't see that as being a risk I want to take. Maybe it has no impact. I don't know. But and also kegs. I mean, come on. We use them for so many things nowadays. I think half of the Brülosophy contributors are now fermenting in kegs because of the fact that they hold as much pressure. I mean, I think they're pressure rated up to 160 PSI. You're never going to get that high. And they have PRVs. So even if it does get overly pressurized, the PRV is going to pop on your lid and you're good to go. I love kegs. They are awesome. I use them for making sparkling water for my family. They think it's cool to have a tap of sparkling water to pull from. Absolutely. Kegs are high on my list as well. William Babcock says, my Grainfather G40 is the bee's knees in Brülosophy parlance. It totally upped my game with one caveat. It took me a few batches of my OG being out of whack before realizing the temperature they provide on the screen is not the same as the water at the top. Once I started using a secondary temp probe on the surface, it all fell into place. The second piece of equipment, which honestly I don't know why everyone isn't using, is the Tilt Pro hydrometer. Oh, allow me to explain, Will. It is amazing and mitigates oxygen ingress 100-fold. Yes, it is a little spendy, but it's so worth it. And I did test it using a regular hydrometer, and they are within like 0.02 points of each other. And the third ish is the brew in a bag in conjunction with the G40. Super easy with super awesome results. Only downside is I had to install hooks in the ceiling and basically use the self-locking pulleys as the grain bag gets quite heavy. Other than that, it is a game changer. G40, that's the second mention of that. Again, I've brewed on it one time. It was with some other people, not my own, so I was really more just observing the brew day. But it does seem like a really powerful, all-in-one electric brewing system. I'm going to skip over the tilt thing because I do feel like I've talked way too much about that. There are just too many things about the tilt that make it less convenient for me. That's why I don't use it. But in conjunction with an all-in-one brewing system, a brew in a bag, and I tend to prefer the brew bag brew in a bags for being stronger than what I've used from other, off-brand companies. Yes, I mean, I remember when we started using brew in a bag bags for even in our cooler, mash tuns and stuff, just to make cleanup easier. And people were like, you don't need to do that. You've got a filter at the bottom. Yeah, but it does make it way more convenient, easier to clean. And if you do get a stuck mash, you don't have to worry about it as much because you can just pull the bag out and the wort's going to drain out of that grain anyways. I think that, for the price, I think they're like $30 to $40 for a higher end brew bag. So worth it. And if you're using an all-in-one system, even if it comes with, a stainless steel filter basket, throw a brew bag in there as well and just double, or decrease the risk of a stuck mash or any issues and make cleanup easier. I love it. I still use one to this day, every day. I have stainless steel baskets and all of that. And I still prefer classic brew in a bag just in my electric kettle. So right there with you, Will. All right, Paul Becker says, gear I cannot live without. 1, electric brewing for improved consistency. 2, glycol chiller for flexibility to be able to brew any style year round. And 3, here we go again, Brewfather for recipe design. Finally, 4, he says, the jaded concentric Hydra, which we do need to talk about jaded too, because I feel like this is the first time wort chilling has entered the topic of conversation here. So electric brewing, absolutely game changer. Sounds like a lot of people are on the same page with that. I do think that one of the big benefits of electric brewing is that whether it's true or not, it makes starting the brew day feels so much easier. And I think that makes people want to brew more because like I said, it just feels like it's easier to get out and start a brew day with one kettle and a bag on the inside, as opposed to pulling out, a big old ice chest or a 3-tiered system, whatever it might be. Paying for propane, making sure you have enough propane, making sure that propane bottle doesn't freeze. Ask me how I know. And the propane stops flowing. You just flip a switch basically and start brewing. It's pretty rad. So totally with you on that. I'm so glad that somebody else said glycol chiller. I think you're the second person, Paul, and I am, as I mentioned earlier, so on board with that. Now, where I live, I don't really have to worry about the temperature being too cold in the winter, but I do know a lot of people who live in the Midwest or in the East Coast where it gets way cold, way more cold than it does here in the wintertime, and they have to be cognizant of their beer potentially freezing or just getting so cold that the yeast isn't going to do anything. The glycol chiller that I bought doesn't have a warming function. It is a chiller. And so in those scenarios, like in the winter, it's not really going to do much for you. And for that, there are some really nice, fermentation heaters. They come in various types, methods, approaches, stuff like that. The ones that I have, I believe, actually came from Delta Brewing Systems and were included with the heating and cooling package that I got for the firm tanks that I use from Delta Brewing Systems, and they work awesome. Thankfully for me, I don't really have to worry about it much. The way that I used to heat my fermenters during colder months was I would put them in a fermentation chamber, and I bought just a cheap $20 ceramic heater that I would plop down into the chamber and make sure that it was closed. And I know there's like a fear that could cause a fire or something like that. I checked on it several times a day. It barely ever kicked on. Again, where I live, it just doesn't get that cold. So it would kick on for maybe 5 minutes, and then the insulation of the chest freezer would keep it warm enough that it wouldn't, come on again for another 4 or 5 hours. So, but again, rudimentary, throwing stuff together is the way that I did it. And yet again, Brewfather, yeah, awesome. But Jaded, man, to me, they changed the immersion chiller game. They are still my preferred chiller that I go to. I use both. The King Cobra is what I've used the most, but lately with my smaller electric all-in-one system that I've been using, I got the concentric Hydra as well, because it fits and it is so awesome and it's so fast. And yeah, there's an argument to be made for water waste, but I feel like the waste using my immersion chiller is a bit less than what it was when I used the several different types of counterflow chillers that are out there. They work. I know people who far prefer counterflow to immersion. They do take up less space for the most part. So, whatever floats your boat, but I'm a huge fan of Jaded Brewing. I love, Clay the guy behind Jaded Brewing is just an awesome person. And boy, do I hope that company is able to make it through this lull that we're in. So, if you're looking for a badass, copper immersion chiller, they make stainless as well. Go check out jadedbrewing.com. I'm with you, Paul. Awesome stuff. All right, final opinion on homebrewing tech comes from Jonathan Williams, who says, I love tech. It's part of what makes the hobby fun. Most just make your brew day more convenient and shorter. When I switched to my 65-liter Brewzilla, the brew day just became way more pleasant, and it knocked off an hour from my brew day. Less cleaning versus a 3-vessel fly sparge gravity setup that I used to use, but it didn't make better beer. But my Brewbuilt X3 Unitank was a game changer, though. I can now do things the, quote, pro brewers do, closed transfers, cone dumps, oxygen-free hop additions. My hoppy beers improved quite a bit and stay fresher for longer. Yeah, I'm with you, Jonathan. I love the tech. I mean, there's tech out there that I've tried out. I'm not going to integrate into my own brewing, but I still love the tech behind it. And the fact that somebody developed, the code and all of that stuff to make these things work as seamlessly and efficiently as they do. But to reiterate what I said at the top of the show and what you're saying here at the end of the show, it's not going to make your beer better. Now, I do think certain process variables, I'm wholly convinced. I would say that I know that certain process variables will improve the quality of your beer, whether that's shelf life or just overall flavor. And one of those is ensuring that your beer just never touches oxygen. So the fact that there is gear out there that makes that just as easy as what normal brewing used to feel like, where you were exposing it to all of that oxygen, I think is super cool. And in my opinion, that is where value lies. If I can get a fermentation vessel that I can attach CO2 to and just keep, 1 PSI of gas on the fermenter at all times, so that I can pull out, samples for gravity measurements. I can pull out samples just to taste. I can check to see, where we're at in cold crashing. I can make, especially, dry hop additions in an oxygen-free way. I just think that's so rad. And there are quite a few companies out there now producing gear specifically intended for oxygen-free fill in the blank, all of this stuff. And the recognition that oxygen is the ruiner of beer, as it were, I think is really cool. And so the fact that there is that technology out there to make those types of things much easier, more efficient, and not have to worry about it, I'm all for it as well. I love tech. I may not love all of the different types of tech that are out there right now for my brewery, but I love that it is there for everybody else. And on that, we are at the end of this episode. Huge thanks to all of our patrons for sharing their opinions and allowing me to blow hard a bit about them. If you'd like to have the opportunity to have your views shared on a future episode while receiving cool rewards for your support, become a patron today over at patreon.com/Brülosophy, and make sure to keep an eye on Brülosophy.com to stay current on all of the fun beer and brewing stuff we are up to. The Brülosophy Podcast is made possible by the generous support of our sponsors as well as all of our rad listeners. We seriously could not do this without you. Cheers to everyone who has subscribed and left a review of our show. It makes a huge difference. If you haven't yet, please consider doing so. Head over to brülosophy.com/support to view a list of ways you can easily help us to continue producing this podcast. If you want a reward for your support, visit patreon.com/brülosophy. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another episode of the Brülosophy Podcast. Until then, think beer.
Start off the morning with some hot tea, lemon and honey cause it soothes my throat. Put some herb in the bowl, yeah, it's homegrown. Ain't gotta go through the middleman.